There we go. So if you didn't figure it out from the title of this video or from the opening sequence, today I'm talking about the Aputure 120D Mark II, which I am once again using as my key light together with the Light Dome Mark II. I will have another video about that as well, together with the Light Dome Mini Mark II. They have a bunch of new stuff coming out and it's all really exciting, but stick around, I will have that video very soon if you want to see that as well. So the Mark II, of course, is an upgrade to the Mark I version of this light, which was already very understandably extremely popular. But of course they did change a lot here in this Mark II, both some small things and larger things, so let's just go through all of those things that have changed. Literally, working from the bottom up, you'll find a single cable now that runs from the wall to the control box when you're not using battery power, instead of the old 2-cable plus power brick mess that you had to deal with. Not only is this longer and simpler than before, but it prevents the cable from being pulled out from the power brick by accident, and there's also an upgraded twist lock on the control box end that's really robust and solid. If that's not enough for you, they also color coded it, making it easier for a friend or assistant to do, or for setting it up in the dark. Moving on to that control box, it is a bit larger since it does now house the power brick as well, but it's also a bit tougher. The Mark I never struck me as low quality, but this is undoubtedly a step up. It's now compatible with DMX controls and has a color-coded XLR style plug on the top instead of the smaller LEMO cable that you had before. There are more buttons on here and the display is a little different, but we'll get more into that in just a moment. Of course, this is still compatible with Aputure's remote control system, and the Mark II now goes all the way down to 1% power, which is awesome for little kicks of light or for subtle lighting in a dark scene, whereas the Mark I only went down to 10%, which in a light this powerful can actually still be too much sometimes. Looking at the light itself, of course, there have been some changes here as well. The yoke is a bit larger, allowing you to swing it above the body if you want to hang this light from above, and the handle where you tighten it onto a stand has been improved from the first version. It just feels a little bit better to use. Up at the top of the yoke, where it connects to the body of the light, you'll find a new style handle to tighten the light's position down as well. This is much better than before, now using an easy to grab shape and a similar design to the brake pads of a car to lock the body in place. It's really solid and doesn't take much effort. You're getting 25% more brightness than the first version, but it does also draw a bit more power, so keep that in mind if you're using batteries. There are also some nice little touches like an included cover for transportation without having to put on the reflector. You still get the very versatile Bowens mount, which works really great with a range of modifiers, especially the Mark II versions of the Light Dome and the Light Dome Mini, which I will have a separate video to talk about very soon, and there's an incredibly quiet, barely audible fan in here. The carry case has been updated a bit to fit the new design, but basically it's very similar to what you got before. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So what's really cool is that on top of all of these changes, Aputure has put a handful, literally 5 special effects built into this light. And as far as I know, it's the first time that Aputure has done this. They do have another RGB light coming soon that looks like it will be a lot more intense and flexible in that kind of special effect category, but the fact that they put these in here at all when the first version didn't have anything close to that is really cool and quite a lot of fun. My one and only really significant complaint here is that they didn't add any kind of USB port or something where they could have potentially, upgraded the firmware in the future somewhere down the road to either add more effects or to maybe improve the effects that are already built in here. The way that it is, just you get what you get, and they kind of, I feel, handicapped themselves a little bit there by not opening it up to being able to be improved or to be expanded. Anyway, to access these effects, you just push this button on the left for a few seconds, and then you can single push that same button to cycle through the modes. The 2 buttons next to that will allow you to choose and adjust the intensity or brightness, and the frequency, which is how fast the effect is or how frequent things like the flashes of lightnings are. The intensity can be adjusted in the same 1 to 100% range as the light itself, and the frequency goes from a scale of 1 to 10. So to comment on these modes individually, I will go over a kind of behind the scenes type walkthrough of the scenes that I showed in the beginning of this video using those special effects. The fireworks scene was the first scene that I filmed, and while yes, my kids are terrible actors, it was a lot of fun. I wanted to get some different colors in there since this is just a daylight light by itself, so I had my wife swapping out some colored gels in front of the standard reflector between flashes. I'm pretty sure I had the frequency set at 10 or maybe 8 or 9, somewhere around there, but I still would have preferred to have a little bit less of a gap between flashes, to be honest. The effect itself is pretty good. The fade out is smooth, and there are a few variations of how many flashes you get in the burst, 1 or 2 or possibly 3 sometimes, I believe, but I wanted to be able to crank the frequency up more to make it feel like the finale, which you can't really do at the moment unless you have a few of these working together. It was really easy to use though overall, and I had the 120D Mark I with the light dome on the other side to light them up between flashes and also to give us a little bit of light for safety since it was pitch black out there. Next up, I shot the TV scene, and this was also really easy as well. The light is more consistent, so I used only the one light to simulate a dark room with myself only lit by a TV. I was shooting this by myself, but I wanted some motion, so I set the camera up on a motorized slider from Digital Juice with the Komodo K5 head from iFootage on there, a little bit elevated on some small chairs. I ran through this a few times to get my acting right, and then I re-recorded some of the audio, like laughing and dropping the popcorn, because you could hear the motor from the slider in the video's original audio. As far as the light is concerned, it looked better than I expected, but it's really subtle. The light dome too looked great here, but I wouldn't mind a bit more variation in the brightness of the effect as it changes, or maybe a few more levels thrown in there since I think there's only 3 levels of brightness now. Maybe even dipping really dark at one point would be okay to simulate, going to a commercial or transitions between scenes in the TV that you're pretending to watch. But you could always have an assistant adjusting the levels in the control box for you while you're recording to get something kind of along these lines if you really wanted to. So just as a quick note here, it seems that you cannot use the remote control with the special effects modes. Of course, the old remote control is the same as the new remote control. It works together with this as well as the Mark I version, but in these special modes, it doesn't seem to work for me, which is a little bit of a bummer. Of course, as workarounds, you could just have somebody physically push the power button for you if you want to turn it on or turn it off. But it would be nice to have the flexibility to use the remote control as well. For example, with the faulty bulb mode, if your character walks into the scene and turns on the light, you want the light to suddenly turn on, and you might not always be able to have somebody right near the light itself to push that power button. So it would be nice to have that. Again, it's something that they maybe could have addressed in firmware updates if that was firmware updatable. So, going back to that original comment, but it's not a huge deal. Again, there are workarounds for it, so it's not that big of a deal. Just I wanted to let you know. So speaking of the faulty bulb mode, that is the only mode that I didn't really get a chance to create a proper scene for. I just didn't have the opportunity, the location or anything to make it work, and I wanted to get this video out to you as soon as I can. I will show you just a simple scene just to show you how it looks, but it's not like a story-ish type scene like the other ones are. So back into the clips. And next up is my debut as a super awesome celebrity showing off the paparazzi mode. This scene was really fun to shoot and super easy. I used natural light as my main light, and it was a cloudy day, so I didn't need to do anything special there. Plus, I don't mind if this looked a little more rough, even if it was in direct sunlight, which it wasn't. I had the 120D Mark II with a standard reflector, and I just put a piece of diffusion over it to kind of cut down the harshness just a little bit. It was actually getting a bit dark. It was just around sunset, and I had the light at about 100% power, I think. It was just enough brightness, but I was shooting at around 6400 ISO as far as I can remember. I shot the main scene first with the light turned on before I got out of the car. I would have liked to turn it on by remote just before I got out from inside the car, but I couldn't because the remote doesn't work with the special modes, and that was all there was to it. After that, I just got the close-up establishing shots and recorded a couple of little sound bits which I actually really didn't end up needing, and that was all there was to it. Finally, we shot the night scene, and my kids absolutely loved this. I used a combination of the 120D Mark I and II here. The Mark I was just giving a slight illumination, like from outside the window, and I used just a small little CTB gel taped on the inside of the reflector. I was shooting through a DIY gobo to get that kind of window blinds effect, and I squeezed the Mark II right next to it as close as I could to get the lightning effect. We sat in the bed with our stuffed animals and fake candle, and I tried as hard as I could to get my kids to act scared, but my daughter in particular was loving it way too much. The lightning effect was cool, but a little bit robotic. It would be cool to see a little more variation in the flash pattern here, and maybe just a little something else to make it feel more organic. But if you're only using this a couple of times in your scene and it's subtle, I think it will still definitely be believable. So to sum up the special effects here, I think that it's not the main purpose of this light, of course. The RGB light that they're developing now does seem like it will have a lot more potential in that area. But the fact that they built these in here, like I said, the first version didn't have anything close to this, and I don't think anybody was really expecting it. So it's really awesome that you have that here. It might not be the most advanced or the most organic sometimes, but it is amazingly fun and it's very cool, and I think that, you know, creative people can definitely use it creatively and get some good results from it. The bottom line is it's just the icing on the cake, and Aputure went above and beyond what they needed to here. So 10 out of 10, hands down, this is a no-brainer for anybody who's looking at this light. If you're even considering it a little bit, get it. It's amazing in every possible way. It's bright, it's got great color, it has special effects modes built in, it's light and compact for the amount of light that it puts out. It's got a bones mount which is compatible with tons of accessories, including the very nice Light Dome 2 and Light Dome Mini 2 and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's just a very flexible and useful light, and again, if you're considering as far as budget wise, if it's a little bit outside of your budget, no questions asked, I would hands down tell you to just hold off a little bit longer until you have the budget for it and get it. You will not regret it. The fan noise is almost non-existent as it was with the first version. You get the remote control, just there's tons and tons of things to love about this light, and you will not regret it, which you may do if you try and go with something a little bit cheaper. So if you have any questions or comments, let me know down below and I will definitely get back to you. If you liked this video or found it helpful, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to see more in the future, and as always, thank you for watching.